Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio. I know you guys were probably expecting me to say something like Conscious TV with Tom and Ramon, but due to some interaction with some people at ECETI a couple of weeks ago, I had a guy by the name of Mike, him and I were talking, and he said, and I was telling him about the 100th monkey effect and explaining it to him. And he said, you should have called your radio show that name. He said, because if you had a name like that as a radio show, I'd already be listening to you guys. And I was like, wow, that, and everything just struck me like, wow, this is it. This is the right name. So here we go. We are now the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. The energies are just flying around. It's been an absolutely amazing.
Yay! Energies.
And Ramon found some sound effects. Yay! so a lot of things have been going on in the world. Oh my God! Look outside your window, guys, and you can just see that things are moving so fast right now. On the website, oh, Ramon. Ramon, go change your diaper. Come on. So.
I mean, when you look at the news, that's how I feel.
Oh, okay. If you guys go to the website and take a look at what we have in the news, there's some pretty amazing stuff that you really should take a look at. There's some new technology being unveiled. Let me say some old technology that's being reintroduced. It appears to be cold fusion stuff. And, I've looked into this a little bit, and I am seeing some pretty amazing stuff. So I would suggest you guys take a look at what we have posted there and follow the links. Read the material, watch the videos. You will see what the heck I'm talking about. There is something really going on. And these people have backing now. So, boy, I can't wait for this to start breaking loose in our society. Another thing going on there, check out the John Hutchinson stuff. He's got some controversial stuff out there, but take a look at what he's got. He's got some very valid stuff as far as how our energy and our the vibrations and the resonance fields and just some amazing stuff. Take a look, guys, with an open mind and follow through and look at that material. It's some stuff that'll actually open your eyes pretty wide if you look at it with an open mind and suspend that judgment for a while. So
yeah, don't forget to so when you can still use Conscious TV to get on the website, but you can also use the 100monkeyradio.com, and to email us, just instead of at Conscious TV, use at the 100monkeyradio.com. So info at the 100monkeyradio.com.
Yeah, both addresses are going to stay active. We're at least for another 6 months, I think we have on the Conscious TV name. So those will stay active until our subscription runs out in another 7 months, I guess. November, when it runs out in November. So both those addresses will get you here. So Ramon, we have the lady of the day here with us tonight.
You mean the lady of the year?
Oh yeah, well.
Stop.
Well, I don't have to read. I'm not gonna bother to read her bio. So we have Crystal Clark, who is, I gotta say, when you read her 101, which I'm starting to read now because I finally got it, it's more, I feel like I'm reading a thesis, and it's like a thesis piece on sacred science. But let me reword that. It flows perfectly. So let's bring in.
Well, hang on. You didn't want to read anything, but I do want to read something, and this this is off Crystal's website, and when I read it, I reread this. I've read it before, but when I reread it today, I said, okay, I'm gonna have to open the show with this in some form. So, man knew an ancient sacred science once. The most important thing the sacred science teaches us is that whether we refer to advanced technologies or prayer, it's always the same technology because everything uses the same laws to function. And the pattern that leads to the creation of all things is also the path to what we today refer to as enlightenment. It is always the same pattern, only the scale changes. Crystal Clark.
Yay!
No,
You guys are
I want to apologize to the audience if you guys start getting sick of me using the.
No, I don't mind a little levity in here, but if you start overdoing it, I think I'm hosting this. I'll just mute you or something.
Oh my gosh! Oh, you guys are so funny.
So, Crystal, I'm gonna start off with an experience I had. So I got your book and I started reading it, and I go to bed, and I usually keep organite right at the head where we sleep. Now, where we sleep Japanese style, so we have futon on the floor, and pretty much we sleep on the floor. So I'm in between sleep, and I start talking to Mother Earth, and I could see the Earth, and I can see myself right next to the Earth, like same size. And I see these waveforms coming out from her. She's explaining to me that when she has an earthquake, that it's like when humans sneeze. You don't know, you know it's coming, but you don't know what kind of sneeze you're going to have. You don't know if it's going to be the really loud, the one that hurts your throat, or the one that, you get all the mucus coming out, or the quiet kind of sneeze. And she says that's how earthquakes are for her. And during that same time, I felt like I was back at 5 years old, and I understood sacred science. And what sacred science was during that was remembering remembering a memory that was slipping away, and I can feel myself getting older and trying to attach myself to the memory, and I couldn't, and it just like slipped away, and I don't remember all the things that I knew at that moment, and I was in between sleep and awake.
Wow, that's really neat. There's a lot of symbology in there about a lot of different things, but
you think?
yeah, but I think you very rightfully and properly understood the message in that we are trying to remember. And, it's really funny because all we're doing is repeating the cycles until we remember. That's what the cycles are for. It's the next chance to remember. And so we're repeating all of this, so we are constantly reinventing the same wheel. We just change, we call it something different. And I think that's important because so much of what people fight over is it's the same wheel, but I say potato and you say potato, and those are fighting words, right? So we're fighting over it, and it's really, it doesn't make any sense. So it's really interesting that you guys both brought up what you did, because this is actually where I was hoping the show would go. So I have to say that the show that you guys did with Hazel Courtney was one of my favorite shows that you guys have done. I really, really, really loved it because I understood that she understood what she was saying. And we talked about this once before. It was in a show that didn't record well, so nobody heard it. But we talked about it once before in terms of, when people know in terms of the vernacular, the words that they use. And it's kind of like if you're on the police force, you get trained about what the codes mean. So if you're on the radio and somebody said, there's a 1013 in progress, you would know what that means. Or if you're in the military, because they love their acronyms, you know what DEFCON or AWAP or what all these other things mean. But people who aren't in that line of work would not understand that. So in that sense, it's really easy for me especially to pick out people who really know it based on the terms and phrases that they use, because again, it just goes back to the vernacular, and she was one of those people that I understood. And there was something really neat that she said. I could swear she's the one who said it. And believe it or not, I wanted to be really, really sure before I brought it up, so I went back and listened to the show today, but I don't have it downloaded onto my machine, so I was listening to it off of your website, so I didn't have any controls to pause it and go backwards and forwards. But I could swear that she said that the conclusion, I don't know if it was her conclusion or a conclusion that she agreed with, that it was like we're all living in somebody else's mind. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Mike. Was it Mike his name? He was a psychologist turned shaman.
Oh, no, that was
No, it wasn't him.
Villanova or whatever his name is. Not Villanova, but...
Yeah.
Okay, well, I went back and listened to it, and I got distracted so many times I missed it. But I'm glad that I had it right, that it was during her show. So if people want to go back and listen to it, I highly recommend it, especially after what we're going to talk about. I know that sounds like a really far-out thing to say. It's like we're living in somebody else's mind. But this is very much tied in with the quote that Tom read from my website, and also what you learned in your dream. And my response to it, in that we're kind of reinventing the wheel. And she talked about some really neat things. She mentioned the term coherence and decoherence, which is something that I understand. Again, I use different terminology. I use integration and disintegration, but I understand that we're just using two different words to say the same thing.
Exactly.
That's all it is. And when she began to talk about the decoherence process, she was saying how when we're in coherence, that's considered in phase, and how that's more of a non-physical type of existence. And then she referenced a man who explained to her that as the decoherence process continued, we became a little bit more material, and a little bit more material, and a little bit more material, kind of down the ladder. And he said to her that these civilizations would have been like Mu, and then Lemuria, and then Atlantis. And she was careful to say, he didn't say that they were, he said that they would be like that. And what I really loved about that is that I understand that that's exactly what Edgar Casey meant when he talked about those civilizations, and that's actually right, what their interpretation of it. We were not, and I know it's a really odd thing because we don't know what that would be like, because we do live in a fully physical universe. To live in a world where it's not that way. And Edgar Casey talked about it a lot in terms of thought form, if you will. But aside from that, I want to go back to what she said about living, how it kind of looks like we're living in the mind of someone else, and how that ties into how we just we relearn the same thing and don't want to kind of admit it, so we name it something else.
Right.
So what I'm going to read here, this is from the Essene Book of Creation that was written by Edmond Bordeaux-Zeke, one of my favorite people for extra material on the sacred science, which is also known as the One Law. And he is explaining the Essene philosophy. And it says, without beginning, the law creates thought and life. Everything that exists, materially or immaterially, follows the law, the one law, which is everywhere present, behind all, governing all. The law is termed God by some people. The law does not exist. It is valid. The law is formless, contains all wisdom, all power, all love, all reality. It never became, it never disappears. The law is everywhere present in the universe, for it is the cohesive force which binds the universe together in all its parts. Man can no more be apart from the unity of the cosmic ocean than a cell in his body can be apart from his body. Man's illusion of separateness is caused by his deviations from the law, which impose self-created limitations in his life. Now, this is the part that I guess I'm trying to find the proper way to phrase it. I personally feel like I'm standing in the middle of two different worlds. I feel like on the left are the metaphysical people with the premise that we can pray all of this away. And then on the other side are the scientific people that say, no, science is the answer. So I kind of feel like I'm stuck in between two worlds because they don't communicate. They're not bridging that gap. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, you have a lot of researchers who will say, well, in Masonic artwork, you've got the left pillar and you have the right pillar, and this is all evil. But in fact, it's not. Basically, what it's saying is that on the left is this way of looking at it, and on the right is this way of looking at it, but the true path is the middle path. And it's getting these two to communicate and work together, not just in self, which is, again, is the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, but outwardly in our community, and even our collective community, is the way we evolve. That's the path. That is what has to happen if we want to get there the right way. So what I think is kind of hard for people to kind of wrap their brain around is right now, we call this the quantum field. But long before religion got a hold of it, it was called the law. And this law was conscious. It was a conscious living entity, which is kind of what Hazel was saying when it's like we're living in the mind of someone else. This became transformed into the Heavenly Father. And I know that people get tweaked out when you say Heavenly Father, but that's because they don't understand what it means anymore. And they get irritated that the Heavenly Father came first. But what people don't understand is that the Heavenly Father in this, or the conscious quantum field, however you want to look at it, is before everything. Everything comes from this conscious field, including our planet and ourselves. Everything comes from this one source, which is why it was revered or referred to before the earthly mother. Now, the earthly mother also came from this field, but you see, it's when the two combine. Yes, we have the Heavenly Father, but it's the earthly mother that gave us our bodies. So we are the child of the two. Does that make sense?
That kind of reminds me of the the Aboriginal from Australia, how they believe that this reality was dreamed up. And by what you're describing, it sounds, like you said before, two different words for the same thing.
Right, that's exactly what's happening. So now this in terms of the pattern, and that it's always the same pattern, only the scale changes, I want to express that. I'm going to take the scenic route. I know I usually do, but I want to make sure that I fully explain it and don't leave any doubt as to where I'm coming from when I do so. So this pattern, remember that it's always the same pattern. So in this sense, we have the first two steps of the pattern in just that one understanding. In that first comes the Heavenly Father, and then for us came the earthly mother in this existence, and that we are a product of them both. And because we are a creation that has one foot in both worlds. And when we don't understand that, that's where imbalance comes from, because we think we only live in this world, or we only live in this world. And this is very much tied to the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, the separation of male and female. I mean, everything going on around us is a reflection of this truth, but we don't see it. But it's in bridging those two, combining them, that's where the magic happens. And that's the place we need to get to. Now, Tom will probably really appreciate this, because this pattern, even though those are the first two steps, something that I really love about tarot is that these steps are laid out in tarot. And tarot works because it has to work. It works through resonance. That's how it works. It works because it's also using the laws. Excuse me. So to explain it, if you're familiar with the Royal Arcana, Ramon, I don't know if you're familiar with tarot, but I know that Tom is. The Royal Arcana are the face cards in terms of just a regular playing deck. But the first card is the King. The second card is the Queen. The third card is the Knight, and then you have a Page. And from there, the numbers work from 10 down to 1. They go backwards. And this is the path. This is the pattern. And that's what's in these cards. And when you learn tarot, especially if you know the sacred science, they give each other, it's kind of a feedback loop, where you learn more about them both by combining them. And this is just one of 1,000 different teachings that you can do it through. So in this sense, the King, he represents the law, the Creator, the Heavenly Father, and he also represents thought. And Edgar Cayce often said, mind is the builder. So the Heavenly Father is the first step. It's the thought, the idea. But then, and this is the formula for manifestation into materiality. This is the way it works. So the idea comes first, and this is represented by the King. The Queen, which we would refer to as the earthly mother, is also the emotion behind the thought. This is also where we get love and intuition. It's the emotion. So a thought doesn't really have that much power. And I know people say, well, yeah, thoughts are things, and they are. But what really gives them momentum is the emotion behind it. So the Queen kind of begins to get involved and make it real. And that's what her job is in the terms of how it's expressed in the major arcana. And then the next fellow is the Knight, and he represents action, the movement required. Because now you've had the idea, and now you have the emotion behind it, and now it's the movement of making it real, the combination of the two working together. And then the Page represents the physical manifestation, or the child. So that's the formula. And this formula is also in the 4 suits of the major arcana, because the King, he represents the suit of swords. The Queen represents the cups, which is the emotions. The Knights represent the wands, which are movement. And the Pages represent pentacles, which are the 4th stage. So when I say that, it's a pattern that repeats. It really is a pattern that repeats. And because I learned the sacred science before I learned tarot, I found tarot incredibly beautiful, because I understood that whoever designed this deck also understood it. They had to have understood it, because it's built on those principles. Now, this is kind of something odd. It's odd, but it's important. So I'm trying to find the proper way to segue it in, but I don't know if there really is one. So Edgar Cayce was asked some odd questions, and I know that a lot of people, again, find his work difficult because he uses religious terms. But we've already been through all that, and we understand that we're talking about the same thing. It doesn't matter what we call it. We can call it Heavenly Father, we can call it quantum field, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, but it does help, though. I mean, the reason I think that this is so important is because we're fighting over stuff that doesn't matter. And until people can really understand that we're all talking about the same thing, I think the fighting continues. So I kind of want to unravel the mystery and bring down the walls so that we can begin to communicate a little bit more on the same page and work together, because I think that's really important. So let me see, my monitor went to sleep. So some folks came to Edgar Cayce, and they understood a lot of this. Again, this surprises people, but, if the questions that they're asking made it clear that they knew that they should be asking that question, right? So they clearly understood part of it. Now, this is tied to codes in the Bible. I'm going to teach you a code that's in the Bible that most people don't know about. There are many different codes, because there are many different ways and planes that you can apply it to. Sometimes there's number codes. But in this respect, the code is the story. And because the story is the pattern, which goes back to that quote that Tom read from my website. And it will make more sense after I read it. So again, this is in Q&A format, and a group of people were asking Edgar Cayce to help him understand the true meaning of the revelation. And for people who are listening, who really enjoyed the first book and do like to do research, you may actually want to write down what I'm going to say, because you can't get this book anymore, and it's coming from the manuscript. So they asked Edgar Cayce, would the history of the Jewish race from Abraham to Jesus parallel the development of the embryo from conception to birth? And Edgar Cayce replied, rather would the history of man from Noah to Abraham, while that from Abraham to Christ would be the mental unfoldment of the body. So does that make sense when I say that the stories are the code because the pattern is in the story? Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, yes.
Okay. Now, just to go a little bit deeper into it so that people can understand how really beautiful it is and how it's being so blatantly and purposefully misinterpreted to match the Armageddon script, which we really need to ditch. In this sense, the four corners of the earth are talked about, and what the four corners represent are their four elements. And these, again, are the four suits in tarot. That's what these are. The first one is spiritual, or the element of water. The second one is mental, or the element of fire. The third one is hereditary, which is the element of air. And then the environment is the element of earth. Now, each of these four elements have three attributes. 4 times 3 is 12. And what I'm going to say to you now, I hope a lot of people will get this huge aha. These are the 12 tribes. Okay, so in terms of the spiritual element, which is water, it has 3 attributes: light, soul, which is love, and will. In the stories, in the scriptures, light is represented by Zabulon and is connected to the digestive system in the human body. The soul, love, is the story of Joseph and is the covering of the body. Will is the story of Benjamin, and it's the bone structure of the human body. In the mental, which is fire, the 3 attributes are desire, choice, and conscience. Desire is the story of Simeon and relates to the organs in the human body. Choice is Levi and relates to the glands of the human body. Conscience is Issachar and relates to membranes. So it goes on and on. I'm not going to read them all. But these are the 12 tribes. And people fight over this and say, oh, it's this bloodline or it's that bloodline. No, no, no. People are missing the entire thing. It's the pattern. It's the pattern that they're missing. And it's the same with Christ. We completely lost the message. I mean, Christ understood the one law. Moses understood the one law. Einstein understood the one law. These really, really fantastic, wonderful people understood it, and they tried to teach it. But the people that they tried to teach it to let them know through their actions that they weren't ready to receive it. And, you know, things went down that weren't necessarily good for these folks.
Crystal, I'm sorry. Before you go on, the 12 tribes, when you're reading the 4 elements, it remind me of there's a book by it was written about 300 years ago by a gentleman named Musashi. He was a famous samurai in Japan, and it was called the 5 Rings. And the four of the rings were the 4 elements, and each one described its attributes, which very similar to what you were saying. But there was one more ring, which I wonder,
yes,
as William Henry would talk about how you have the 12 stars or the 12 sisters, and then you have the one missing, or back again with the four cardinals, and you have one missing cardinal, which in the
right.
In the Musashi book, they talk about as the nothingness or the emptiness.
Well, I mean, that's one way to look at it. I was actually going to get there, and this is in the book too, in the first
Sorry, I
book.
took the express train.
That's okay. That's okay. But before we talk about that, what I really want to express to people is that I know that it's frustrating for people who have been denied the truth through religion to go read an Edgar Cayce book that says, where he will tell people coming to him for a reading, if you want to know all of this, go read the book, and he's talking about the Bible. But the problem is people don't understand the sacred science anymore. They don't understand that these stories are the codes. Everybody's running around, talking about, this hidden Bible code. The stories are the code. But people don't know that, so they have no idea what they're looking at. And it's always the same pattern, only the scale changes. So if it's happening spiritually, it's happening physically. It's always the same pattern, and it's fractal, which is really important to understand. But to go back to what you were talking about, this is the pentacle. The five-pointed star is the symbol for man, and this was really beautifully illustrated in the Vitruvian Man painting. That's what it symbolizes. And you see, these four elements are earthly elements. You have the mental, the emotional, and the physical, and you have the spiritual, which is your self here. But the fifth element is the God mind. It's the oversoul. That's the fifth element, and it is from this place that all life comes from. And if we aren't tapped into it, we miss it. We deviate from these laws that give us life because we don't know them anymore. And that's why the upside down pentacle is the reverse of life. That's what it means. And I know that people get a little bothered by that because Hollywood's, done a wonderful job of making sure that everybody thinks that every pentacle that ever exists is evil. But in fact, humanity has a fifth element, and it's our connection. We are connected to that source, which was so beautiful about what Hazel said, because when you understand the sacred science, you understand all of these laws, and we'll get to the law part so that, again, it's not equated with religious dogma that doesn't work anymore. You realize that all of these laws, there are so many of them, and they were so perfectly implemented. It's so elegant, and so much work went into all of this. Every single law has a very specific purpose, and purpose requires intent, which means that they were created through intention, and intention implies consciousness, right? So yes, this field, this Heavenly Father, this one law creator, however you want to look at it, is from where everything ultimately comes. That's what it is. And that's our connection to it, is that point at the top, is the star. I was going to talk about something else, and I totally lost it. Where was I? I totally forgot what I was going to say because I started thinking about something else. You guys don't know? I don't know why I'm asking you. Okay. Well, because it was in my own mind, right? Well, okay. So anyway, that's what it was. Okay. So yes, this law is conscious. It's alive. It's not just an energy field. And so it's very true what Hazel said, right? Well, no wonder they have CERN looking for the God particle, but really you just have to look in the mirror because you're part of it and you're attached to it. And that's what's so beautiful about it, and I think why humans are so special in their own design, because we are not separate from it. And it's not just that we are not separate from it, but yes, this field is the mind of someone else, we could say, and yet our own minds get to interact with it, don't they? And that's where the co-creative part comes in, because it's not just us being bossed around by some, great Manitou, the Heavenly Father, the conscious field. We were given the right to access it and use it ourselves to build whatever we want. And I think that's really the key to understanding what co-creation is. And and also the key to making sure that we understand there is no external savior, because we are the savior. But if we don't recognize it, then we continue the road down that goes down to degradation, disintegration, and death. But we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. So part of trying to explain what all of this is and means is really important, and to explain it on just a really small scale so that people know what I mean when I say a law. It helps a lot to think of it as computer programs. They're codes. And it's somewhat of a long story, but I'll try to make it fast. But there was a woman I contacted in 2008 because there was an article she wrote that was really beautiful, and I wanted to put it in the book. And a couple of days after I contacted her, I got a call from one of her friends who heard what I was working on and wanted to talk about it. And she asked me if I had ever heard of the Ringing Cedar series. And I told her, well, I know. The Ringing Cedars.
Hmm.
And I hadn't heard of it, and she said, well, I'm surprised because a lot of people think these are the greatest books ever written. I said, oh, wow. She said, well, I'll send you a link to it. And I didn't understand why she was asking me about it, why she would bring that up. She sent me a link to a press release, and there was a man in Russia who was learning some things from a woman called Anastasia, and he was writing these books about what she was teaching him. That was really as far as I got. After I did the interview with Mel on Veritas, a few months later, people were emailing me and saying how similar my work was to the Ringing Cedars. And I still didn't make the connection because I had not read the book. But then somebody finally sent me a video of a man who was responsible for translating the books into English because they were originally written in Russian. And he started talking about some of the principles that were in the book. And this is really, really neat. And when I talk about this, if it seems strange, try to connect it back to the idea of programming an element, which is what Masaru Emoto proved that we can do. Only in this particular case, it's not thought energy, it's direct energy, in a sense. It's more material. But he was talking about how before you plant a seed, you're supposed to put the seed in your mouth and let it interact with your saliva. And I'm sure you guys both know that technologically we're at a place where if they want to know if you have a disease, they don't need a blood test anymore. They just take your saliva because all of that information is in there. You put the seed in your mouth, and your saliva programs the seed. And then when you put the seed in the ground, it literally grows a customized plant that will include the vitamins and nutrients and minerals that the saliva told the seed you needed for your body to become healthy. Now, why does that work? It works because it was designed to work that way. That's one of the laws. And I would imagine that there are, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, but we don't know them anymore. So when I say that when we deviate from the law, we begin to experience disintegration, degeneration, and death, that's what I'm talking about, because if we understood that we could do that with a seed, that one little thing could probably extend our lives by a couple of decades. But here's where something really important needs to be understood. Yes, in Scripture they totally messed it up, and I get that. So I'm going to try to clarify it as best as I possibly can. There is a difference between deviating from a law and breaking a law. This, if you can see again, this is a code, meaning that this seed was coded to do what we just talked about. That's in its code. That's what it does. So in that sense, if deviating from the law, all that means is if we don't know that particular law or rule or code that gives us life, then we don't use it. We deviate from it because we don't understand it or we don't remember. But even though we deviate from it, meaning we ignore it or don't know about it, it still exists. It's still a valid law. Whether we choose to use it or not, it's still there. It's part of the program that we live in and the way it was designed. Remembering that every single teeny tiny code is designed to uphold, restore, and regenerate life. That's what they all do. That's what they're supposed to do. breaking a law is when you have somebody like Monsanto come along and they re-engineer the code. They change it. Do you see the difference?
Right.
Yeah.
Now the law is broken. It's been altered. It doesn't work anymore. And so that's the difference. And it's important that people stop seeing this through, religious fervor and all this other nonsense, because we're talking about the laws of creation. That is literally what we're talking about. And if we don't understand them, and we don't know what they are, and we don't know how they work, we don't understand when we aren't using them properly, nor can we understand when greedy biotech companies are literally breaking them. And we depend on these laws for life. So now I didn't know the story about the seed before I ever came across Monsanto. But the truth of the matter is that because I understand that everything has a law, that it was programmed perfectly, that altering these seeds is breaking those laws, it did not surprise me at all to find that when cows and pigs were fed these seeds, they either died, they gave birth to empty water sacs, or they became sterile. And you see, when you understand it, everything just makes so much more sense. There's a lot of people that talk about Nostradamus quatrains and how Mavis is the Antichrist, and it's a person, it's an anagram for a person. Well, look, I found the word in the back of a really special Bible I have, and it's listed in the study guide for anybody who wants to go look it up. The word Mavis means seed. So when you read that Nostradamus quatrain, and it says Mavis soon dies, and then comes a horrible undoing of people and animals, you instantly recognize this has nothing to do with Saddam Hussein or some Antichrist or Osama bin Laden. We're talking about the laws of life being broken and altered, and the seed is a big part of that. And you see, every law co-creates the other laws. So as soon as you break or alter one of them, the interaction isn't there. Does that make sense?
Right.
So it's really important for people to understand. And the reason the book, I know it's kind of a long book, is because, even I haven't known this. I've known it for about 7 years, and I've done my best through, at least up until the time I finished the book, to try to flesh out bits and pieces of it through other people's research, looking at it through the lens of the sacred science. If they notice that in the lab this happens, like Masaru Emoto's work, well, I could look at that and go, oh, that's the sacred science. I can use that as an example to help people. But there are so many other parts to it in terms of these teeny tiny laws, and I don't know them all. But the reason that the book is so long is that I tried to give examples in literally every field I could think of in case a person is in that field so that they could make that connection. Does that make sense? Right.
So a lot, this kind of going way off topic here, but we tend to do that sometimes.
Who, us? Never. We're professionals, remember, Tom?
So there's some key things that I think people that would really benefit from, though, even those who have not gotten your book and have looked at this material. Keys to becoming a first-class investigator. I thought this was probably one of the most important chapters in your book. Because you take this material and you can apply it to everything that you're looking into, and you brought up some very, very key points that people need to really take to heart when they are looking through material and trying to find the truth out of it. So would you explain some of the keys that you put in here a little bit?
Yeah.
So what does it take? Let me rephrase that. What does it take to be a first-class investigator?
Well, what it takes, first of all, is a complete lack of prejudice, which is really hard to do because we see everything through filters. So really, before I even get into the real meat and potatoes of the sacred science, I start to slowly talk about this stuff, these boxes that we have, how we see everything through all these filters, and how maybe the filter is religion, or maybe it's our parents, or we've been programmed to kind of see the world a certain way, and that it's important that if we want to see it for what it is, we have to let all of that go. And if you approach a person with this idea from an emotional perspective, you'll never get anywhere. So the idea of including the chapter about the keys to being a first-class investigator is to really look at it through the left brain. I mean, I get that people are left-brained people first, so I don't mind meeting them on common ground and saying, okay, well, let's look at it that way. If you were investigating a murder, how would you do it? How would you get your evidence? What would it mean if you refused to accept it, right? I think that's really important, because I think there's an example I use where an investigator, if you were kind of putting yourself in his shoes, and say you were investigating the murder of a child, and you had physical evidence that would tell you who committed the crime, but you didn't want to believe it, so you didn't include it. And when we don't do that, if we can't put aside all of the judgment and just look at the facts for what they are, in that particular case, the wrong man can go to prison for life, and the right man goes free. And it's the same in our studies. If we have to have some kind of I don't even know that it seems right to call it a moral compass, but you have to have some kind of set of guidelines that are just non-biased. You're just taking it all in, and then as you move through the sacred science and you begin to, because I do present it in stages, because some stages have to be met before the others make sense. It's kind of like if you went to a young child who lived in a high crime area and said, well, this is all happening to you because you don't know that the Heavenly Father is the quantum field. I mean, you can't do that, There's steps that have to be taken so that it unfolds the right way. But there's a statement that I make in the beginning of the book that once you understand it, you really will, and I know this is a bold statement, but I make it because I mean it, but you really will be able to know what is right with certainty. You'll know, because you'll understand how it works. So, for example, if I had a member of my family whom I really love, many years ago come to me and tell me how important genetically modified food was because we could feed all the starving people with that. That's a huge lie. And he bought it from somebody else who sold it, But the fact of the matter is that if people understood this, you couldn't buy and sell that kind of garbage. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
People would know better. And I think that I'll be really honest. Humanity is on the precipice of something magnificent, absolutely magnificent. But yeah, maybe you and I can go. Maybe we're spiritually evolved enough that we can go. But I don't want to go alone. There are 7 billion people on this planet, and I want them to be given the time that they need and deserve to work through it. And this is where the inner technologies and the outer technologies have to be put into service. This is where we have to bridge the gap, because there is a shadow in the world that is damaging our Earth immensely, and it's speeding up. There's a shadow that wants to implement population control, whatever you want to call it. And the reason this is so cruel, and I really, really want to make sure people get this, there's never, ever in the history of this round of being on the loop has anything crueler ever been conceived, because you're talking about eliminating billions of people 10 minutes before they ascend.
Right.
It's wrong. So again, we have to bridge this gap, because yes, people say, well, we can just sit around and pray all day and fix everything. Well, go tell that to a starving child in Africa and see how far that gets you. He can't eat that. and then the other people, oh, it's science, we need GMOs. No, look. People need to understand how the laws that have been broken and also the principles that they work on. Because when you understand that there are outer technologies that can be applied. Now, don't misunderstand, because I'm not saying that prayer and intention don't work. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I go into that in a great deal of depth to make sure people do understand that it works. But there's more. And because of where we are, the outer technologies have to become a part of it. And a really good example of that we've talked about before is what John Hutchison did in the Gulf of Mexico with these harmonic codes. He could have healed the Gulf of Mexico if he could get enough people to understand that it's not metaphysical mumbo-jumbo. It's a very real technology, and in fact, it's the technology that all life is based on. And because there are people who know that aren't big fans of you and I, well, that's where we get HARP, and that's where we get weather modification. That's where we get bioweapons or cyclotronic weapons, because all they're doing is keeping the information for themselves so that they can alter these codes. Really, if you wanted to look at it this way, I know that this is a phrase that, I can't think of her name all of a sudden. Sonia Barrett, she was on your show.
Right.
And I think one of her books, I've not read her books, but I have listened to a few of her shows. I really like her stuff. But I think one of her books is called Hacking the Matrix. I've not read her books, so I don't know if she goes into it in this kind of depth. I think what I've inferred from it is that for her it's more of a personal hacking your own matrix, getting out of your own box. But what I'm saying is that there are codes for life, and that when they weaponize these codes, they're literally hacking them and altering them, like they do with a computer virus. They're changing the way they function, which goes back to the seed example. The moment they began genetically modifying the seeds, they changed one of the codes for life. And now life is suffering for it because you have to have it. That's the way it works. So that's an outer technology, right? They didn't pray that change in code. They physically altered it. And this is another thing that I think is really important to understand. Before I'll begin talking about some of these outer technologies in just a moment, because they're really important and they do work. But this is another thing that's misunderstood, and this goes back to that you and I are a product. We are a creation that has one foot in both worlds, the spiritual world and the physical world. And of course, again, this is male, female, left brain, right brain. There's a really beautiful carving, and I think it was Michelangelo who did it, of Moses with two horns on his head. Are you guys familiar with that?
I don't think I've seen it.
No, I've never seen that.
Now, a lot of researchers that get way too into conspiracy stuff without really understanding what we're talking about immediately jump on the idea that, well, that's because Moses was evil. You'll have people, Moses taught moon worship or Jesus taught sun worship. I mean, it gets so far out there and away from what's really going on, it really pollutes the waters. But the reason that Moses had the two horns is because those are the two powers. Those are the two powers that we have, because we are a manifestation of them both. And those powers, one is the left brain, one is the right brain, which is why there's a horn right over each hemisphere. That's what they signify. It has nothing to do with evil. Absolutely nothing. So to get into this a little bit deeper, you might hear somebody say, well, you can't get sick from something unless you believe you can. Have you guys heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's the thing. This is not true, and it is not a good thing to tell people because it isn't true. And probably the fastest way for me to explain that is the story that I have used with you before about giving my son fluoride. Well, he's an infant. He has no idea what it even means to say this will hurt you or it won't. He's just a baby. Mom's giving him a bottle full of stuff. He didn't like it. It was doing something that was damaging him and causing pain, and he was crying for 3 days because of it. And that's not because he thought it would. It's because it actually did. That's again, that's where these two powers have to come together. We have to bridge that gap. A lot of people go and get vaccinations, and they do it because they think it's going to keep them healthy, and some of them die. So we have to understand that the code can be hacked both ways. The body has a code, just like that seed did. And if you inject a virus into it, literally, just like a computer code, it doesn't function the same way. It starts to break down. So you can physically affect physical things, but you can also energetically affect physical things, because physical things are created through the energy. So it happens both ways. So this is where the inner technologies and the outer technologies come into play, because the inner technologies are prayer, meditation, intention, chanting, toning. Those are personal inner technologies. The outer technologies can cover a much, much greater area, very vast distances, globally even, if you used HAARP, let's say, as a rice machine. And why is that important? Because, again, we need to begin to heal some of the damage that's being done, because we really want these 7 billion people to have their chance. We don't want their journey cut short right before the finish line. That wouldn't be right. So this particular technology that I'm going to discuss, it was written by a...
Crystal,
yeah.
before we get into this, we are rapidly approaching the top of the hour here. So
Okay.
I would like to kind of, instead of having to cut you off in the middle of this, I think we should push this over into the second hour.
Oh, okay.
So, but definitely I definitely want to get into this. Some very intriguing stuff what I've seen so far. So anyways, well, we're a couple minutes shy of that 1 hour mark. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and I want to thank Crystal again. And
let's give out the website again in case someone tuned in the middle on BBS.
Yeah, www.the100thmonkeyrradio.com, and that's all spelled out. So
formerly known as Conscious TV, so you are listening to the same show.
Yeah. So join us. We really we're resonating quite well with the 100th Monkey, and we might probably need to explain the 100th Monkey again. Maybe we'll do that in the second hour. Explain what that's all about. But join us over in the archives, guys. We're going to continue this conversation, and I'm sure if you've listened this far, you will want to hear the rest of it. So.
And I also want to give big thank yous to Don for renaming everything and always working with us and helping us out the show.
Absolutely. The guys at BBS are fantastic. We love you both, Don and Sarah. Thank you so much. So,
have a good night.
Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. We'll see you guys in the archives. Oh, hang on. I haven't cut it off yet. TheSoulSociety.com. You got to make sure that's Crystal's website, and pop over there. She's always got some fantastic stuff going on. So.
Oh, let's give the name of her books.
Oh. Who Are We Really 101, Return to the Shaman, and Who Are We Really 102, When Tomorrow Comes.
And when's number 3 coming out?
103, soon to be announced.
Yeah, in the fall. I try to get it out before Christmas. I think November is probably a good...
In the second semester?
Yeah, I'm trying. So,
okay.
It's a neat book, though. People will like it.
Okay, we'll see you guys in the archive.
It's the right time to make you free your mind. Wake up. If you're missing, then press rewind. It's the right time to make you free your mind. Wake up. If you're missing, then press rewind. It's the right time to make you free your mind. Wake up. If you're missing, then press rewind. It's the right time to make you free your mind. Wake up.
Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon's Archive with Crystal Clark. And we're going to continue on with our conversation. We were just getting into some pretty amazing stuff that's been out there for a long time, but got pretty squashed. Crystal, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, there have been so many visionaries, and I really do mean visionaries, that have tried to bring this remarkable technology. And again, you can apply it so many different ways. But this particular one is really interesting, and I don't know that a lot of people know about it. I thought I had the author's name here, and I apologize, I don't. But it was a book written, from what I understand, in the 1990s, and it's called The Paper Doctor. P-A-P-E-R, The Paper Doctor, a vibrational medicine cabinet. And before I describe some of the images that I've seen from the book, because the book was banned after it was released, and some people try to recreate it. It's really hard. You can't get it. I found one used copy on the Internet that was almost $3,000, so it's very, very rare. But before I talk about what's in it, I want to read a quote from the beginning of it. It says, "We stand at the beginning of a paradigm shift in healthcare that has far-reaching consequences for everyone. The old model, a mechanistic, part-oriented cause and effect viewpoint, is giving away to the new, a whole-being, spirit-oriented, energetic approach to the treatment of illness. In the language of the physicists, our Newtonian universe is giving way to the Einsteinian one. The solid particle has also been seen as a wave. The observer must admit that he determines what he observes. Everyone and everything is in the same soup. None can stand apart and judge. Detachment, the very spirit of Newtonian science, is impossible." But there is one thing about this that I think deserves a little bit of explanation. He mentions that the old model is the mechanistic model, which is basically if there's a problem, we cut it out, right? You know, if your thumb is turning green, instead of trying to heal it, we just cut it off, that kind of thing. Part-oriented, cause and effect, which again is medication that doesn't really cure an illness, it just hides the symptoms. But then he says, is giving away to a whole new being, the spiritual-oriented treatment of illness. And there was a part, there was something else I read in the beginning of the book that talked about moving past cause and effect, which he refers to as the old model. And this isn't entirely true. What is happening is that we are beginning to understand cause and effect and how that really works at deeper and deeper levels. So I think that's an important thing to understand, because that's what the sacred science helps us do. It helps us see how material things are created. And one of the things that Hazel Courtney mentioned in your interview, which is a term that people learning about the quantum field will find familiar, and that is repatterning energy. And I think that's what this fellow was getting at when he said we're moving beyond cause and effect, because we can repattern the energy through an external technology. And again, yes, if you know how, you can repattern energy through love, prayer, and meditation and chanting and toning. But so many people don't even believe that that exists, or aren't skilled enough to do it, or they don't know how. But the external technologies, I think, are really important to keep them healthy long enough so that they do get the opportunity that we all got to have time to understand it. So in that context, the images that I were shown from this book, it's very odd, I know, to describe, but basically they're just circles. They're circles. If you took your hand and you connected all of your fingers with your thumb and made a circle, they're about that size. They have concentric rings around the outside, and then they have these lines placed within the circle. What's unusual about this is that it differs considerably from the geometric shape theory. Now, geometric shapes do have their own frequencies. This is a little different. Before I explain this further, there's an invention that I want to mention that people also are not aware of that I think will help people understand this better. I met a man after the book came out. I was contacted by a man who showed me patents that he had for unbelievably incredible technologies that were squashed and destroyed. He was a visionary. He was a college professor back in the 70s doing remarkable things, and it attracted the wrong kind of attention. I was told about a device that could take the frequency of one thing and transfer it into something else. Now, the application for this was healing. And he was so excited because he thought, oh, you know, the drug companies are going to love this, the medical community is going to love this because you don't need to produce pills anymore. Because imagine if you could take the frequency of a pill and you could copy it into a bracelet and just wear the bracelet and not take the pill. Well, they didn't like it, and they squashed it really fast. But that is very similar to what I'm talking about here in this technology with these circles. Because remember that everything has a pattern, and we looked at that from a different perspective in terms of the stories in the Bible. The stories are the patterns. They're teaching you how the patterns work at various stages applied to various planes of our existence. That's what they are. Every living thing has this special code or pattern. And what these circles do is emulate or imitate the pattern of something so that you don't have to have the actual thing. And in some cases, these images produce the frequency of plants. So if you know, let's say a person has a liver condition and you wanted to use clover, red clover, but you didn't have the actual plant. You could, if it was in this book, this particular plant, flip through the book until you found the circle that represented clover. And you could take this, cut it out of the paper, put it under a glass. It would program the water in the glass as though you were using the actual plant, and then you drink the plant. Or you drink the plant. Oh my God! You drink the water.
You do that.
Sorry. Anyway, okay, but you get the idea. Okay. So these are the kind of technologies that I'm talking about, and you know, we're at a place now where they know that plants are healing, and what are they trying to do because of it?
GMO.
Get rid of them. Make them illegal. No, you need a prescription for that. You're not intelligent enough to know, you know, that you can use aloe vera on your skin. Apparently that's a problem. If we ever get to a place where people no longer have access to these plants, or if you live in an area where you don't have the plant, and the person doesn't know how to pray and meditate and adjust their own energy, these kinds of externally applied frequencies emulate the plant. Now, this same kind of thing, again, you can use this technology so many different ways.
You also add a magnet to that?
Yeah. Now, see, I didn't realize this. These are called remedies. That's what these are. They're called remedies. And because what I was shown didn't have the part of the book where it showed you that you were supposed to have this magnet that you used along with these remedies. I didn't use the magnet, but I tried the remedies and they do work. Now, I'm not going to tell you what specific remedy I used or who I used it on or what for, but it did work, but it took a few days. So I imagine that if you had the magnet, you could make it happen a lot faster. It would amplify it significantly. So that's really, you know, that's what I mean by outer technologies. Now, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with it. I imagine that you're familiar with it to some degree in terms of what John Hutchison was trying to do with not just the Gulf of Mexico, but with the radiation problem that we have. Did
with
you guys
the rebar.
that?
Yeah, with the rebar and And the ham, what was it, Tom? The CB radios and
It was ham frequencies, I believe.
yeah.
Right. Now, what he's doing is, again, he's emulating. Yes, it's an artificial frequency, but it emulates a frequency that gives us life. It repatterns the energy. It's very similar to, what these remedies do. And it should be understood that the plants themselves, if you didn't have the remedy and you use the actual plant, you're still getting repatterned. It's still the same process. It's the exact same thing happening. What John Hutchison was trying to get people to understand is that maybe the easiest way to explain it is we know that a harp sends out frequencies. And he kind of was asking people to help him create a new global harp system in which the proper frequency would be broadcast to mitigate the radiation in the atmosphere. And yes, it will work. The problem is getting people to understand that this is a very real technology. That's where the problem lies. And I think it's important that, we do our best to try to get people to understand that it's a real technology because we very desperately need it at this moment in time. So I don't know if you guys have any questions about that. I mean,
I do actually, because the rebar in the ground, I was reading it and I don't fully understand how does the rebar act like what's those antenna called? So the signal comes in and then the rebar just sends it off to the next place, or?
Well, that's basically
like
it.
an
The rebar
extension
becomes an antenna.
A repeater of some kind.
Yeah, it becomes an antenna. And if there were enough of them spread out over the planet, it would be able to propagate. And that's really important. I know that even metaphysical and New Age teachers are trying to downplay the seriousness of the radiation that has been released from this plant. But I can assure you it's a big deal. It's a lot. It is a lot. The reason that people have a hard time with some of this stuff is they say, well, look, we have fluoride in the water, and we have this, and we have that, but we're all still here. Yes, but that's because we haven't crossed the threshold. And that's important to keep in mind.
Well, I mean, with that being said, I grew up where I live at. There's a Con Edison building, which I don't know if you guys have Con Edison on the West Coast.
No.
That's the electric company, and there's 6 or 8 transformers there, and a lot of women in our building. Growing up, I had free electricity. They didn't charge us for it. And the building next to us was the Con Edison building. And I know personally 3 women who died of breast cancer in my building. 1 and 2 who survived it. And I'm sure there's others with it in that building. And that's just the building. That's not the surrounding area. So to say that it's not affecting, that people are not dying, people are dying. They're just like, oh no, it's natural causes, Yeah,
I mean, we're not seeing it now, but at some point we will. And I've had personal issues with this kind of thing myself. My family moved constantly when I was young, and at one point we moved to a small town that was originally a mining town. And right after we moved there, we all got really sick. And it affected all of us a little bit differently, but in my case, I slept for almost 2 weeks straight once. I didn't want to eat. I didn't get up to use the bathroom. I felt like I weighed 1,000 pounds, like I couldn't get up. And my memory got really bad. I started having, like I would stutter a lot. I couldn't form complete sentences. I mean, it was just very, very noticeable. Now, the people who were born in this area didn't notice because to them that's the way it always was. Or also, and this should be kept in mind, if these people were born there, remember that seed that gets programmed by its environment to overcome? That probably, I would say, more than likely also happens in the womb with a child, in that they themselves are programmed for their environment. So the children who are born there may not have, the kind of problems that I had coming in as an outsider, per se, but it was shockingly odd. It was very strange. We went to the doctor, and they said, "Oh, you have chronic fatigue syndrome."
What?
So what the hell is that, right? Oh, it's yuppie disease. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, hey, I can't form a complete sentence. I don't like it. Help me out. And how do you fix it? And their answer was, well, B12 injections.
Sure.
Now the mining company that started this town, it's one of the largest open pit mines on the planet where they mine here. You can see it from space. It's so large. And this mining company had mining operations all over the place, and I didn't know that. A couple of years later, I left there and I moved here to Las Vegas. And I was reading the local paper one day, and I found an article, and I think the story is in the book actually, but I found an article about how Salt Lake City was suing this mining company for contaminating their surface and groundwater. And I wanted to know what they found in the water. So I called the paper in here, and they said, well, it was just a paragraph we took out of a paper in Salt Lake. You have to call Salt Lake. So I called Salt Lake, and they said, well, we don't have any of that information. We just have the general information to fill space. But what I understood from that is, when I lived in this small town, I had family, because it's a mining town. So if the mines aren't open, if the price of the ore drops too low, the mines close until the prices go back up. If the mines aren't open, you're talking about a 90% unemployment rate in these locations. It's very, very high. But I had family who had worked at these mines who had all kinds of gruesome stories about how they had carted away the carcasses of dead animals from the cesspits of where they would dump out all of the toxic stuff that they used to mine. And they were doing something called bleach mining, and the simplest way to explain it is it's like pouring cyanide on the ground, and it eats the earth until you have the ore left, you could say. That's one way to explain it. It's very, very toxic. And where I lived, the place where I lived in this small town, it was the smelter, where they take the ore and they burn off all of the impurities. And depending on how toxic something is how high the smokestack has to be. And this smokestack was so high, it had lights on the top for airplanes. It was massive. The ground had been contaminated for so long, and all of us were drinking well water. So when I got my hands on this story, I was so mad. I was enraged that these people were being allowed to contaminate and poison all of these people and not tell anybody. So I called the EPA, and I told them that I wanted to report an illness that was linked to contaminated water. The EPA said, oh, you need to call the CDC. So I ended up talking to whoever was the head of the CDC for the state of Nevada at the time, and he said, oh, you need to call the EPA. So they just really played the finger-pointing game. But I'll tell you what happened after that, though. What happened after that is 3 months later, all of these toxic places where they would dump the sludge or whatever, and you could tell, it was just nasty green and orange mounds. It was really gross. They fenced it all off, and they built brand new wells. Oh. And in fact, a friend of mine lived there, and I had lost touch with her. I talked to her a couple of years after this, and she said, my father worked for the assay department, and he was wondering what was going on when the EPA came in and started testing the water. So you see, on the phone to me, they were lying and playing the runaround game. But they didn't particularly like the fact that somebody caught on. So again, these things physically affect people. And so it's important that we understand all of the different ways that, our planet is being poisoned and that we work to begin to correct it. And of course, you're going to have people that are going to say, well, we can't do that because if all of these, plants shut down, where do we get the metal for our cars? And what about all the jobs? Well, again, that's where the external technologies can come in, at least for a while. But it's very much like you said, Ramon, even now, that place, that this small town I'm talking about, it's been over 20 years since I've been there. Even now, there are women that die of breast cancer there. It has a very high rate of breast cancer. And in this particular case, it's not just because of the poisoning in the water. It's because when all of the nuclear detonations were done out here in a place called Jackass Flats, out here near Las Vegas,
Yeah.
they were downwind, and it contaminated the soil that way too. So the outer technologies can help us clean up our planet. And I think, I listened to the last interview that Mel did with Richard Dolan.
Yes, I heard that one yesterday.
About his book AD, After Disclosure. And I thought it was great. I really loved it. And I know that a lot of people are talking about, the government's going to release, disclosure about UFOs, and then we're all going to, live in peace with these entities, and they're going to give us new technology. But I can tell you exactly why that won't happen. It won't happen because the exact same technology that you and I are talking about is the exact same technology ET would give us. And if the government isn't going to let us have it, they're not going to introduce us to ET, who would teach us the same thing, right?
Right.
You see how that works? So I think that if we can just get enough people to understand how the technology works, how they are also part of the process, as an individual, there was something else really neat that Hazel mentioned. She mentioned that when you put your ego into the service of the all, that you grow faster. And that is exactly true, and I wrote quite a bit about that in the first book because it's true. I lived it. I went through it. And it's really important that we do that. But each of us have a very specific way in which we contribute to the overall collective. And I know people don't even like the word collective, but when you have 7 billion people on the same planet, I really don't know what else to call it except for a collective. And in the book, I call it Team Earth to try to get away from that, but really it's a collective. So I'm going to read the definition of dharma. Now, dharma and karma, if you read the definitions, depending on where you go, are very, very similar. Okay, this definition it's from Wikipedia. And it says...
I have that tattooed on my arm, actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Wikipedia?
Yes,
Yeah,
Wikipedia on my arm.
Hey, they might actually start paying money to people to do that.
They actually are already.
No, are they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
terrible. Oh. Okay, well, I was being a smart aleck, but I guess not. Okay, so this is the definition of dharma. Okay, and this is going to be very meaningful given everything that we've talked about. That which upholds or supports means law or natural laws, as in the natural order of things, and is a concept of central importance in Indian philosophy and religion. In the context of Hinduism, it refers to one's personal obligations, calling, and duties. And in Hindu, dharma is affected by the person's age, caste, class, occupation, and gender. We'll come back to that in a minute if we have time. In modern Indian languages, it can simply refer to a person's religion depending on context. But this is the part that I think is really important. The idea of dharma as duty or propriety derives from an idea found in India's ancient legal and religious texts that there is a divinely instituted natural order of things, and justice, social harmony, and human happiness require that human beings discern and live in a manner appropriate to the requirements of that order. According to the various Indian religions, such as Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, beings that live in accordance with Dharma proceed more quickly toward personal liberation. That's a really long way of saying that, yes, putting your ego into service for the greater good is part of your dharma or purpose, or really even karma in some cases, depending on how you want to look at it. And that's something I really stress a lot in the first book, because people ask all the time. I know you guys hear it as much as I do listening to other shows. What do I do? What do I do? And if you ask 10 different researchers, you're going to get 10 different answers. But really the truth is that what I came here to offer is not the same as you guys. And what it is for you guys isn't the same for me, and it's that way for everyone. Everyone has a very unique imprint that they came here to leave, to uplift humanity. Those are the gifts that we come in with. Now, where this is tied to what we talked about before, where it said, and it might have seemed odd, where it said, Dharma is affected by a person's age, caste, class, occupation, and gender. Well, this is very much the case, because even though I came here to have a very specific experience, I came here to give to that experience. I mean, this goes back to, it's such a difficult thing to express because it is so beautiful and profound, and I cannot even begin to say how much work went into making this all work the way it does. So much work goes into our lives. It's really unbelievable. But the fact of the matter is that evolution and revolution aren't the same thing, obviously. Revolution is going in circles. If you and I, during what's supposed to be our evolutionary phase, miss something, then we have to repeat it. But what we have to understand is that the cycles have to repeat so that we can repeat that part of the cycle. Because let's say what I messed up in a past life was how to wield the power of having everybody chipped properly. Let's say I decided I was going to be nasty and control people. The only way to get me into that situation again, to give me the chance to have a do-over, is for that cycle to repeat all over, and then for me to be reinserted into the cycle once the technology is redeveloped. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so now if we go back to the person's age, caste, class, and occupation, and by caste what they're referring to is social status and demographics, or financial status. Yes, it's true that not all of us are here to be millionaires, obviously, but what people have to understand is that what they came here to give to the program, this is hard to explain. Let me put it this way. Yes, we had to be reinserted into this program to relearn the lesson. But at the same time, what we come here with as a gift is also needed at this time to help people evolve. If we don't understand what it is and we don't manifest it, then the entire collective suffers for it, regardless of who we are. It doesn't matter if we're a janitor, or if we're the president, or if we're an airplane pilot, or a stay-at-home mother. Each and every one of them are not just taking from this experience. And that's what I mean when I say it's so elegant and beautiful, because the gifts that we have are also programmed into our bodies through some of what we just looked at in terms of occupation and gender. And we also know that there's genetic imprinting involved. So very much a part of choosing this life isn't just about what you can take from it, it's about what you can give to it. So, which is, I think the easiest way to try to explain it is a story I use in the book. Why are there so many healers here right now? Well, the reason there are so many healers here right now is because it's needed right now. So that's how connected all of this is. It's not just the cycle repeating, and we're just innocent parties, trying to have a do-over. We're here to contribute what's needed at this moment to get humanity to lift itself up and evolve to the next stage. That's a really important thing for people to understand. And again, the woman that first took me to go see the psychic that I went to was telling me about a psychic that she knew in New York, a street psychic, who would just draw a picture of you doing what some people refer to as your karmic theme. that's what I referred to it as, because I had actually never heard the word Dharma. At the time I wrote the book, I didn't know what it was. I was looking at it through karma, but again, karma and Dharma are very, very similar. And this woman drew her, my friend, with a mop in one hand and a plate of food in the other. She's not a millionaire. She's not Oprah. She doesn't do lectures and, consciousness teleconferences, but she's the kind of person, if you're going through a crisis in your life, she's the one who comes and gets you through it. And that is no less important than being president. And so when people say, I don't know what to do, yeah, I can teach them the sacred science in as far as they're willing to learn it and are ready to understand it and apply it in their own life. But there's more. There's the self. What did self come to contribute? I can't give people that answer because it's not my Dharma. My Dharma, or my spiritual theme, as I refer to it in the book, is to be a writer and a healer. That's what I came here to contribute. Now,
really
because
quick.
it's different from...
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Crystal. Before you continue, do you know, because I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of emails and Facebook from a friend of mine's in New York. Do you know how to get in contact with that woman?
No, I don't. See, this is so funny. This is the other thing that we realize. We realize a lot of people need to make this distinction. And again, and this is in the book too, all of this, because I learned all of this on my journey, and I really want to try to help people. Sometimes people are just passing through in our lives because they are here to give us something. But sometimes we don't let them leave. We latch on to people we shouldn't sometimes, but if you get to a place where you can see into people, kind of like that namaste, you see into them, you begin to understand why the two of you are connected, what it is you're meant to give each other. And then when the time comes for the two of you to go on your way, should that be part of the equation, it just happens. And you look back on your life and you realize people kind of just whirlwind in and whirlwind out. They give you what you need and they move on. And that's what she did. Not long after I went to see this psychic is when all the stuff started happening, and I left the corporate world, and that's where I met her. I have not talked to her in 9 years. So, yeah, I don't know how to get a hold of her, but the psychic that I use is really, really good, and her information is in the book so that people can go to her, because that's her karmic theme. That's what she's here to do, is help people find out what they're here to do. And this is important to understand because all of it's connected. So every time one of us doesn't have the courage or the strength to do what we came here to give, it was in giving that one thing that would get somebody else on their path. And then when that person gets on their path, they have what they need to help get other people on their path. Do you see how, it's like these dominoes. And so it's really important that people really take that know thyself to the next level, because that's what all of this is about. That's really what it's about at the end of the day. That's what it's about.
And speaking of that, how can someone who just tuned into the show, has no kind of background on any of this, doesn't know anything, is still maybe stuck in the old paradigm mentality, as we like to call it, how can then somebody like that, or even for ourselves, how can we start activating ourselves or coming into our true power?
Ask.
Go ahead, Tom.
The first step is to ask from your heart. What's the one question? To asking God or whatever you want to call it, that entity, the life force, whatever you want to call it. Ask from your heart, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, that really helps. Now, I can tell you that I get that it's just going to sound like I'm trying to sell a book. I get that. But there's a reason that I wrote it, and it's because I wish somebody had written it for me. Right. Because I went through hell for a long time because I had absolutely no idea what was happening. I had no idea what I was asking for, what it would mean to ask, what it meant to understand, how did I know I was getting an answer, what does all of that mean? it just really helps if you understand the process. And the reason, so yes, asking is important. And I would say it really is that simple. I know people say, well, you need to chant and tone, or you need to go to yoga, or you need to have a mantra, or this or that. You just have to ask. You just ask. But it does help if you know how to ask.
True.
Because really open-ended questions give you really open-ended answers, and
True.
then it's too hard to, it's too hard to narrow it down, and you don't get it. One of the things that happened to me when I wrote the book on my journey. I didn't write it after. I wrote it from the beginning to the end, and I each phase of the journey was done in a certain way. It was subtle. It helped me understand why those phases have to come first. So it's a kind of a guide on how that process works. And the process itself is very similar for everyone. It's a very similar process of what you go through. And in fact, we talked about that last time. You get to a phase where universe, creator, whatever you want to call it, tells you, hey, you can't go any farther unless you get rid of all this negative emotion, and that means going back and making things right. That's a phase that you have to go through. So it's very similar for everyone, but I'll tell you what happened is by the time I got to the end, I understood things in such a more detailed way that I was actually trying to go back in the beginning and add more detail, and I was smacking my hands saying, don't do that, because what's the purpose of taking somebody through the journey as a beginner if you get to a place where you understand it better and then go back and change it, right? So it really does help. And, I know that you guys aren't necessarily beginners, but the sacred science is in there too, because everything is connected to everything else. So there's a great deal of depth to everything. Every little teeny tiny story in that book, there's a great deal of depth to it. But we only see the part that we're ready to see the first time through, which is why I left the journal pages, because when you get to the end, you are not the same person. And then I encourage people to read it again, especially if they are new to this, because they will not view it the same way, and it may even shock them what they wrote in terms of how they responded in the beginning. It may shock them to go back and see how much they've changed.
Right. Well, when I said ask, that is the very first step that I personally took was I asked, what the hell's going on here? And it started directing me towards all my answers. Tons and tons of more questions came along the path, but that was my first question that sort of activated the magic, so to say, and
right.
or the sacred science, or however you want to put it, that actually started me towards finding answers.
The one thing I've noticed time and time again, especially before the show, I used to try to kind of push this more onto people, and I learned not to do that. Step back and let them come to you. If they have questions, they'll ask. But the question I will always get is, well, how can that help me get a job? Or how can that, because they're so stuck in the 3D realm that the question is, well, how can that help me pay my rent? One time there was these two girls, and they had, I don't know what happened to them, but they were kicked out of their house, and they didn't have any work. And I was telling them, try going into meditation and clear your mind. And one guy goes, man, sorry, I was about to curse. That's not gonna help. They need money. They don't need none of that blah blah blah. And I just let it go, because I realized there that they're looking at it from one point of view, where I'm looking at it from a completely different point of view, and they're not going to be able to see what I'm trying to show them.
That's true. I prefer to look at it in terms of meeting people on common ground. If I know that I'm talking to a person who thinks that even religion, New Age, anything is just unicorns and glitter, what I try to get them to do, yeah, I know, unicorns and glitter, I know. So, and I've done this especially with a lot of my husband's friends recently because they have lost their jobs, they've lost their homes, and even their wives in some cases. And then I just tell them, look, if you could do anything you loved, anything you wanted, something you're really good at, something you're really passionate about, if you could do that for a living, what would it be? And the sad part is that 9 out of 10 people have no idea.
Right.
But I can almost guarantee you that the people that have the answer, that's what they're supposed to be doing. And when you are doing what you're supposed to be doing for the right reasons, not for the money, then you get to a place where you don't really care about the money because you're living a life of joy, you know? And I think that's really important. So I do try to redirect people that way sometimes, but it is sad how many people say they have absolutely no idea what they would do. And, you know, I know what you were talking about a minute ago because I had a bunch of friends before all this started on my journey who were passing around a little book called The Prayer of Jabez. Are you guys familiar with that?
No.
It's a little teeny tiny book about this prayer, and it was basically, I would think, the precursor to the book The Secret. It was a little teeny tiny book of prayer, and every single friend I had a lot of Christian friends, but everybody was passing this around. Not all of them were Christian, but a lot of them were, and they were all using this prayer to make more money. That's what all of them were using it for.
Huh.
So when The Secret came out, I never read it. I still to this day have not read it because what I thought in my mind was, this just sounds like a more grand version of the Prayer of Jabez, and people are going to use it for money. And I think that's, you know, that goes back to something we were talking about before in terms of intention. You know, I had somebody tell me one time that they were using a life coach who was basically treating them like they were an idiot and saying, well, you don't know how to use the power of intention properly because you're still broke. And I told them, I said, look, the power of intention has a time and a place. And the proper time and place, you will only know after you've went through the phase where you can ask a higher power, I don't know what's right for me. Help me understand. Because the intentions get in the way. So, you know, and it did for me. I spent my entire life intending to make money, doing something that I was using my gifts, the gifts that I use now, to do what I'm supposed to do. I was using them in a perverted fashion for a corporation to make the corporation more money so that I could make more money. That's what I was doing with it. So there does come a point where don't worry about the intention. Just listen. And then you can work with intention. And it's similar to, you know, that experience I had with the water talking to the water in my shower.
Right.
Yeah.
I understood, I was able to live that moment and have that experience because I didn't intend for it to happen. I just lived it. Sometimes you have to let the intentions go because if I had focused on, am I going to hear a response from the water, I would have missed the whole thing. You know,
Right.
It was because I didn't know, you know, it was innocent. And so there does come a point where you just need to ask, really, who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing in the service of others? And people, I know, get really irritated with that. Why, you know, you didn't come here just to do everything for everybody else. But what I discovered is that when you do what you're supposed to do, yes, it helps other people, but you're the one who really grows from it. You're the one who learns the most. And I think that so many people are missing that because they're chasing money.
Yeah, it's so funny. Dr. Brooks explains it that when you have, like, for example, an intention and you want something and you put it out there, but then we're so used to, so the universe, so we have this huge funnel, and then when you start adding the way you want it, you start closing that funnel down. So now your funnel is all the way to the right, very thin, and you don't know if it's coming from the left or down the center. Example.
Right.
So I find
yeah.
when I have the weird experiences, quote unquote, it's usually just like you said. You just like say something and you kind of forget about it, and then boom, you're hit with the weird experience.
So let go and let God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. And isn't it ironic that that's how remote viewing works? Same way. It's that same principle again.
Actually, when it comes to that field, I think all of it works that way. Because I find even telepathy or anything like that works that way. You gotta let it go.
Yeah, and so I know that people. Intention does have power, but be careful what you ask for. I talk about this a lot. Really, I talk about this a lot in the book, and Hazel also talked about it in terms of her trip to New York. She talked about all the things that happened to try to keep her from going, but she pushed.
Right.
And she shouldn't have. Now, I learned how to take those cues, and I don't push anymore. But a lot of people do, and I think intention is a form of pushing. And I don't know if you guys have ever tracked how many people have become millionaires and how awful their life ends after that. Have you ever seen those stories?
Yeah.
People they win the lottery, they come into a lot of money through an inheritance. Truthfully, they don't generally live very long afterwards.
I knew a lot of street guys that came into a lot of money, and it was fast.
Yeah, they first of all they learn they have they get used horribly, by their family. They become substance abusers. There's suicide. Because we didn't come here to make money. Now, it's weird, because we have changed our life so much that there's almost a fear of having money. It's strange. And in fact, last time I went to go see the woman I refer to as Margaret, she noticed that, and she said to me, "Don't worry, it's all going to turn out. You're going to do really well." But she looked at me and she pointed her finger at me and she said that you have to not be afraid to take the money. Now, I know what I would do with it now. All the wonderful things that I would do with it for other people to make the world a better place. But, so there's that side of it too. Balance, it's really important to look at all of the angles that surround your life and to find that space of balance, because some people do reject abundance because they've had an experience with it that it reminds me of I love that story. You guys are so funny, you crack me up. Do you remember that story you were telling about being at the ranch and the blinking green light, and you had and it was
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a coffee.
Yeah, that's so funny. I sometimes I go back and listen to parts of shows we did, and they still crack me up. You guys are so funny. But it's kind of like that. We have to notice, are we saying yes, yes, I'm ready with one hand and still pushing away and saying no, no with the other? So that's important too. So if you are ready for abundance in your life, first of all, don't try to ask God for, I'm ready for money. I think abundance is a better word because it can come in many different forms. And what I consider abundance may not be the same thing you consider abundance, or it may not be the same kind of abundance that we need. So it does help in that sense to kind of leave it open and say, yes, I'm ready for abundance, and to reaffirm that. You know how people will say you need to use affirmations, because it really does help in a way. If you are kind of blocking something, it's important to recognize that. So there's just a lot of different ways to look at it.
It's kind of that goes into the repatterning of your thought process.
Yes.
What you're saying reminds me of a commercial in America. The guy is so funny every time I see the commercial. The guy is like, I have 2 cars in the parking lot. I have a swimming pool. I have a great big house. How do I do it? I'm up to my eyeballs in debt.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that
people
is
are
so
learning
common. That is so common
Yeah.
with so many people.
You know, it is, and you know, my husband and I, we don't have credit cards. We never have. We don't use them, and it shocks us to our core.
I'm allergic to them.
Yeah, I mean, it shocks people it shocks us to our core to have people say, "Yeah, I'm $10,000 in debt on my credit card," and I don't even know how to process that because it doesn't even make sense. Because you're paying interest. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go buy a microwave for $100, but then I'm going to pay somebody else $50 for letting me borrow money to do it. Just wait till you have the money and go get a microwave for $100. You know, it doesn't make sense. I mean, intellectually, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. That's something me and my wife been going back and forth because she wants to get. We don't have any credit cards here in Japan. And I'm like, don't get any. I got rid of all of mine. And she cut hers in America because, you know, she can't use them.
Oh, right.
And then she's getting one here. I'm like, don't get it. But they lure you. The way they lure you, because I see it happening to people around me. They lure you like, okay, so if you want to buy, like here in Japan, if you want to buy a ticket online, they don't use PayPal, they don't use, and here we don't have debit cards. So it's not like in America where you can use a debit card and you can buy stuff online. If you don't have a credit card, you're not buying it. So they lure you.
That is inconvenient, yeah.
Yeah, they lure you to like, you have to have a credit card. And the way they lure you in America,
that's not cool.
The way they lure you in America is, well, if your credit score is low, and you want to raise it up, you get a credit card.
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, I mean, you know, if you know how the game works, don't play it because you know who wins in the end, and it's not you. You know, as far as that goes. So, you know, and we have friends who have filed bankruptcy 3 times. They just and this is what's really sad about it. This really, you know, irks me. 3 months after bankruptcy, they get new credit card applications in the mail.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They troll at bankruptcy courts, I'm sure. The credit card.
Yeah, I mean, it's just shocking to me that you know, people can just keep doing that. You know, I don't know. You know, how can you feel good about yourself knowing that you're doing that? It's, you know, that doesn't make sense either. And, oh, I'm getting away with something. No, not really. It's stealing. Even if you're stealing from a thief, you're still stealing, right? So, I don't know. It's crazy. But, yeah, people are going through a really hard time right now. And I think that, I know that it's hard because the money system isn't working out the way people had hoped. But I think that it's a good thing as long as people get engaged in building the future and decide where they want it to go and not let somebody else decide what they want to replace money with. That's important. My husband was listening to a program the other day. I was outside and I heard him laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" He said, "Oh, their commercial said you can't find the New World Order, you can't fight the New World Order from your couch." He thought that was hilarious. There's a lot of truth in that, right? I mean, you can't just sit here and say, "Oh yeah, there's a great future coming," and you know, not help go create it.
Right.
And so I know that sometimes we talk about the rebuilding phase, and I think that people are misunderstanding that because when you say rebuild, the mental picture is rubble. But why do you have to wait? Start now. You know, begin the rebuilding process now.
Be the
Don't wait.
change.
Yeah, I know you and Tom have noticed. I've gone into this. I don't know, like my wife calls me an old school wife. She says that to me in Japanese because you know she's at work and I'm usually off during the day and I work in the evening. So when I'm home, I'll be doing things like making cheese and I'm gonna start getting to smoking bacon, as I was saying before, and you know, like the old school style, like 100 years ago kind of thing. Yeah. And even things like that, that's simple. I find that it's necessary because it's getting in touch with what your grandmother and great grandparents are going through. Things they did. They didn't go to Key Food or whatever supermarket you have by you to buy everything.
And it's a gratifying, and I think that's what's kind of hard for people to understand. When we work in a corporate situation, we don't really work hard. I used to work 80 hours a week, but I wasn't working hard physically. And when I went through my journey, because I was so confused, I was so upset. To have your entire life turned upside down almost instantly is a very difficult thing to go through. And I didn't know anybody who understood, nobody. So I started digging. I know that sounds really strange, but we bought this it was our first house, and it was kind of an old junker, and we were trying to fix it up, and I thought, well, I want to dig, and I would dig for hours and hours and hours for weeks.
Did you get to China?
I tell you, and I dug out all the crabgrass and all the junk, and I put in nice soil, and I landscaped it, appropriately, beautiful. Because there are desert plants that still need shade. You have to be careful. And it was absolutely beautiful when I was done. But the real reward was my cracked hands. You know what I mean? It just felt good. It felt really good to make something with your own two hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
It feels good. And we don't get that when we work in a cubicle all day long, right? We're wrapped in a maze, and you miss that connection. You really do.
There's never really that you get your paycheck at the end of the week, but there's never okay, we made more money for the company, and the company got a new big bank account, but for you personally, at least for me, I don't feel anything from it. It's
you got in your position, you need, if that's the way you're seeing it, you need to look at what you're doing a little bit differently, because the interaction that you're having with the kids that you work with.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about working at a cubicle.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about working a 9-to-5 job. I'm not. I was thinking when I used to work in the party design thing, not with the kids.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's a lot of different types of jobs out there, and mine in particular, and there's a lot of creative jobs out there where people are actually using their hands to actually the manufacturing industry. Not so much the assembly line stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that gets put together out there that's custom stuff that allows people to use their creative abilities and shows that reward and gives them that reward at the end of the day of look at what I've created, along with the paycheck. And sure, the company made money, et cetera, et cetera. But those jobs are out there, and that, I don't know. I promote that type of work because I love seeing people get out there and use that, get those creative juices flowing and build something, create something, even if it's doing it for somebody else to make your living. It's something that can bring some reward into your life as far as when you go home at the end of the day, having a good feeling. So those jobs are out there. I understand the corporate world, the paper pusher stuff. God, I could never be behind a desk like that. But
Yeah, I could never last at those kind of things. I've personally have always been like a freelancer type. But there was a to get a little bit off topic. There was a story I wanted to say, and I'm not gonna mention who the little girl is. But I was talking to this 5-year-old girl, and Tom knows the story. And I said, I was listening to Hillary. We were interviewing Hillary Ramon. She was saying how her grandfather would ask certain questions, and he asked her, like, do you remember your past life? So I asked this little girl, do you remember your past life? And she's 5 years old. And she goes, yeah. And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe she doesn't understand the question. So I just said, do you remember your name? She goes, no, but I remember what I look like. And I go, what did you look like? And she said, I had a rainbow body. And Crystal, when she said that, I had to really fix my face really fast. Because I was in complete, utter shock. That's the last thing I expected her to say. And then
Wow.
And then I asked her, I said, is this your first time here? She goes, uh-huh. And right when I was going to ask her, why are you here? Do you know? People came in and she just shut down right away. Like she knew inherently. And then later I told her, like, don't talk about this. Just keep the secret. Because people don't really understand these kind of things. And it's really sad that you have to tell people that.
Yeah.
You have to tell your kids that they can't, they can't really talk about those things openly. And it's really, really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is hard. And there's some neat stories I put in the book about my son because he had some really incredible encounters and unusual things happening around our home when he was a child. And you do learn that children have access that we don't have access to because the world hasn't shut it down yet. So I just hope that in 10 years that little girl still remembers and doesn't think that it's all nonsense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so as well. But I going back to the, I don't know if it was a dream or a vision or what I had. It was around 5 years old when I felt that what I kept calling the sacred science was slipping away. I think it's around that age when it starts slipping away and you start noticing the world doesn't work in that way.
Yeah, you get forced to choose the inconsistencies instead of the truth because that's what everybody else accepted. I agree with that. In fact, I think it's common. Most people will tell you that their earliest memories are 5. And I think that has a lot to do with it. It's really hard to remember anything before that because we kind of shut that part off and just, plow ahead in the world with all the grown-ups because they will treat us differently if we don't. Like, there's something wrong with us. I mean, I got really lucky when I was a child because my parents were kind of hippies. So, which I'm actually grateful for because if I had parents who were the kind of parents now you see these, yuppie parents, I probably would have been drugged really fast. So I got lucky that I was born into the kind of family that I was born into, and that just, because also the time was different. You could stay out until 9 or 10 o'clock at night when it was dark when you were 6, and nobody wondered if a pedophile picked you up. It was a different kind of world. And so the kids kind of it wasn't that we raised ourselves so much as we just got to explore stuff without an adult there constantly saying, be careful of this, be careful of that. You just got to, exist and enjoy life a little bit more. And so it was really fun, and I got lucky because children really don't have that opportunity now. And I didn't have somebody telling me, no, that's not real, no, you can't do that. I just, it was just my life. It just seemed normal. And then you get older and you meet other kids and you meet their families and you realize their families are different, right?
Yeah.
So, it's strange. It is. I tell you, most of my life, I've felt like I'm always on the outside looking in, like I'm a stranger to the planet. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it's my life and I live it, but so often I feel like I'm looking at it from the outside. I don't really know how to explain it. It's odd,
Mm-hmm.
So talking about this, and we were talking about that 5-year-old stage, it just popped into my mind that I'm going to have to look this up and find out the origins of this word. But all this stuff starts disappearing out of the children's lives when they enter kindergarten. So just a lot of questions are flowing into my brain right now as far as what is the real purpose of our organized school? Is it designed to wash that out of the brain? What does the word kindergarten mean? I mean, I've never really thought about that. What does the word kindergarten mean?
That's a good question. I've never really
It's
looked
funny.
at it either.
I mean,
Because I'm thinking about it in Japanese. In Japanese, it's yochien.
you get the garden part. I understand garden. So, but what does the kinder part refer to?
Well,
Oh. I understand.
like kinder soul, kind of? Or,
but is it
or kin?
to acclimate the child to a third dimensional reality? To make them kindred with the controllers or with the system. I don't know. A lot of that brought on a lot of questions in my brain. So we've actually made it through. We're ran over an hour here already. So one thing I did want to talk about is what the 100th monkey is, and we've mentioned it a couple of times on other shows. But there was some research in the 50s where these scientists were working with these primates in actually the Japanese islands. And I believe this research began in 1952. And their food source for these monkeys was dwindling fast because of the population explosion on these islands. And they were being chased into reserves and parks and all this stuff. So they were bringing in food for these monkeys to eat, and they started bringing in these sweet potatoes, and they were doing this through the whole chain of islands to all the monkeys out there. And these monkeys were just eating these potatoes. You know, they dump all these potatoes out in the dirt, and the monkeys, they just grab them and eat them. Dirt and all. Well, they taught these monkeys, a few monkeys, how to wash their potatoes off before they ate them. And the monkey said, "Hey, this is good." So these other monkeys began teaching the rest of the monkeys that were on this island how to wash their potatoes. So, and they found something really strange about this too. It's the older monkeys would not learn it. They would totally refuse to learn how to wash their potatoes. They just did not do it. So
Sounds familiar.
this is, this pattern is reflected everywhere. You see this all over the place. But so it took I think it was 1957 when this event happened. So you got 5 years of these monkeys on this one island. And they only did this on the one island where they taught the monkeys how to wash the potatoes. And the monkeys on all the other islands, none of them were doing it at all. Not a one on these other islands were washing their potatoes. So what they did, once they hit a certain population, a number of these monkeys on this island, they hit a breaking point. And all of a sudden, all of the monkeys on the island, even the older ones, at this point, when this level was reached, the older ones that had refused to wash their potatoes up until this point began washing their potatoes. And at the same time, simultaneously through all the other islands, all the monkeys began washing their potatoes. So I just found this absolutely amazing, and reflected kind of my dream of what I see happening in the world as the number of people who become conscious of speaking with Crystal, of the sacred science, of the one law, of consciousness, and the reality of the place that we find ourselves existing in. Is when a certain number of and I don't know what that number is, but when a number of our population of the humans on this planet understand and comprehend this, the one law, that it becomes something that is automatically understood by the rest of the population. So that is the theory behind the 100th Monkey, and the reason why Ramon and I have decided to adopt that name, because that, at least in my heart, it is such a dream and desire for me to see in this world. So there you have it, the 100th Monkey.
That's so great. It was funny. I found the original book that story was written in. It was from a long time ago, and I included part of that story in the first book because I recognized people didn't even know that story, and it's such a beautiful story. Because that's what happens when enough people understand something, it becomes everybody's property intellectually. It's just it's a threshold that you cross, and I think that we can get there, and I think it's really important that people understand, because at this point there are people participating in things that they don't understand, and they're doing it out of love. It's being misdirected.
Right.
And I'm very, very, very grateful to you and Ramon for being so gracious and doing these monthly shows with me, because it's very, very helpful. I think the two of you are wonderful, wonderful people, and I just love you to death. But you guys are really just like brothers to me, and I really, really enjoy my time together. You guys are great.
Thank you.
Well, we will continue this, and we'll continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper until that point is reached and it's no longer needed.
Awesome.
I have a question to ask you before we let you go. I'm not gonna let you go that easy.
Okay.
Has in the have you gone through any like a weird experience recently? Anything strange?
It comes in stages. Okay, well, what are we talking about? Strange? No, there's a lot of different kind of strange things, but I think you mean like physically, in terms of physical changes in evolution, right? Like, is that what you mean?
Well, that could be part of it, or that could be, I don't know, some being showed up in your bedroom, or you saw something strange, or an elf gave you a piece of gold. I don't know. Like.
No. From what I understand, what usually happens is you go through a phase where you're given information, and then depending on how you apply that information, the next phase is activated. So if you understand it and you apply it properly, that is you saying to the universe, okay, I'm ready for more, and then the universe obliges. It's really kind of a more cause and consequence thing, but there is consciousness, an exchange between, conscious beings happening also, remembering that the field is alive and it's living. So that's been my experience, is that you have a period of activity, and then you have a period of rest, and then a period of activity and rest. In this sense, right now, I'm in the application phase of what I was given. But before this, I did go through a phase where I was getting dizzy a lot in my sleep, which I know sounds strange, because how do you know?
No, I'm going through that now.
Are you? Yeah.
It's not really dizziness, but I feel like I can feel myself in the bed. Yes, I can feel myself in the bed, and I feel myself correctly, but then I'll go through a few seconds of I feel everything moving, but I still know that I'm physically lying down, but there's another part of me that feels that's moving around.
Yeah, that was the last period of strangeness for me. And just so people know, listening, you and I have never talked about that before, right? This is the first time we've ever talked about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are completely independent people having the same experience, and didn't know the other person was having that experience. I think that's important, because, again, it really is similar. Yes, different people have, it's a little different in terms of your personal lessons, but the stages and phases are very similar. And that was the last really weird thing that I went through, and that lasted for about 3 months. And really what it was is, in the middle of the night, I would wake up to roll over, being uncomfortable, and when I would kind of sit up a little bit to roll over, it felt like the room was spinning, like I was moving. You know what it really felt like? I know this sounds strange. it felt like I was moving energetically faster than my body. Like it took a minute to catch up. It made me feel dizzy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like kind of like a half an OBE, I guess you could say, where I'm rolling over and it's taking my body like a minute
Your
to
body's
catch up.
catching up to your etheric body.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to explain it that way kind of makes me feel like that's what was happening because of this sensation. It was dizziness, but not like normal dizziness. So it was easy to
not like a
understand
bad
that it was
feeling
a medical.
dizziness.
Right. It was easy to understand that it was not a medical condition. Like, oh, I have this problem, I need to go to the doctor because there's something physically wrong. It was definitely something else.
Yeah.
But that was the last problem that I had. Although I did do a meditation wrong once, and that messed me up for about a month because I didn't get all the energy out right. So, there are learning experiences along the way too. But yeah, we go through phases. The universe says, you say, okay, give it to me. They give it to you, and then the universe sits back, hands off, and watches. How much does she understand? How much more should we give her? Is she ready for it? Will she apply it properly? And then when you kind of work your way through the process, they go, okay, she's ready, and then you begin the next phase. But it's definitely a phase kind of thing. I mean, some people do, like Hazel did, have, this instant Kundalini experience. I had one too, but like I said, very, very different from what other people say. Really, it would sound creepy to people, I'm sure, so I don't ever really talk about it. But yeah, it can happen that way too. But generally, the process is stages because you want to do it the right way. It should be organic and natural.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, that's good stuff. It's all good stuff.
yeah. I was just thinking about a story John was telling me. I don't remember the guy's name. Some guy in India. He was a successful businessman, and all of a sudden, Krishna showed up on his bedside and just kind of, I don't know what he did exactly, but like just awoken him completely. And Krishna told him, from this day forward, you won't eat, and you won't need to drink water. And according to what John was telling me, that the guy doesn't eat or drink for like years now, and he just feeds off the universe. And in the third eye area, I hear a lot of Chinese Buddhists talk about where you reach a point where you get like in the back of your throat, coming from the pineal gland, like this sweet kind of syrup thing. And supposedly the guy just like secretes that. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? The what's it called? You familiar with it, Tom?
No.
Not exactly, no.
I'm not.
Okay, so when you reach a certain point, I had a friend of mine who this happened to, and so you reach a certain point in your meditation, and your pineal gland secretes like this sweet nectar, and it's usually what some people say is what they call like the nectar of the gods, not coffee, Tom. And it secretes in the back of your throat, and it's really sweet. And for some people, like the rumors they'll instantly like become like 5-10 years younger from it. And my friend,
I've not heard that.
my friend said he was doing meditation. He practiced Tai Chi, and he was standing in the standing pose, and both your palms facing you with your fingers facing each other. And he was doing that for a while consistently. Every day he was doing it. And he said he felt that. And he said after he swallowed that, it was this boost of energy. So anyway, going back to the guy supposedly just secretes that consistently. Most people just get a little bit of it, and then that's it. But he supposedly secretes it consistently.
There was a article I saw on this guy from last year where they took him into a hospital there in India to put him under observation because to validate his claims, because he's told people that he does not eat and drink, and everybody was like, oh, no way, you got to do this. So they put him in a room in a hospital for 3 weeks under 24-hour-a-day observation, and he did not eat, he did not drink, he did not leave the room, doesn't have to go to the bathroom. And he did this. He was in this room for 3 weeks and walked out just as healthy as he was when he walked in. And I'd like to find that article again, share it with you guys. I get that on the website too. I'll
Yeah.
see if I can dig that up. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stories
pretty
of
incredible.
Yeah.
there's a lot of stories of different guys in India like doing stuff like that. Just like this, like the whole story with Sai Baba and stuff like that. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that for me personally, I don't like the feeling of being overcharged, So it takes, this is another part of the teaching that maybe we can get into in the next show, where the body physically has to change to be able to handle more energy. And I think until that happens, it's important not to try to, you just have to be careful, I guess is what I'm saying. And Hazel talked about that too, and I was really grateful that she did, because you don't hear a lot of people being honest about that, and that you need to be careful. So I know what it makes me feel like when I'm getting overcharged with energy, and I already have a lot of energy. I know that I can contain a lot of energy already, so when I get overcharged, I can really feel it. And, you can hug a tree, or you can, barbecue some chicken or whatever, to kind of get it back down to a place that's comfortable. And that's, that was something I did in this meditation I do. I bring in enormous amounts of energy, and I shoot it out. It's kind of a long story. I'll tell you privately about it. But this one particular time, I didn't get it all out. And a month later, I was almost paralyzed from my neck up, and I had lockjaw. And I didn't make the connection right away. I thought, because I was in a car accident years ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, I must have slept on my neck wrong, and I'm having problems. And then that night, and it was so painful. I mean, I was on the verge of just crying all day long. It was so painful. And I thought, tomorrow I have to go to the chiropractor, because I couldn't chew and I couldn't talk because my jaw was in so much pain. There was pain shooting up the back of my neck into the side of my head. It was terrible. And then I got this idea. I thought, oh my gosh, I'll bet I didn't let all of the energy out. So that night I did this clearing, and I shot it out, and the next morning I was fine.
Yeah.
So
We'll have to
pay attention.
We'll have to get into the clearing thing too in the next show, because that's a very important process that people should do.
Also with the for example, one way to build up your circuits is in Kung Fu. You see they do this all the time, and that's their main thing, is they'll hold a position, and the more painful it is, the longer you hold it. And what it does is, because when you extend your arm out, your brain sends a signal, put your arm out. But when you hold it there, the brain is consistently sending that signal. So what happens is that your wiring gets thicker. And that's why you'll see these Qigong masters, they'll hold positions for hours at a time. And that's what it does, so your body can flow more energy. And they're always, whenever they do those powerful meditations, they release it either through what they call hard Qigong, which you'll see them, they'll start hitting something, and that's just to release all that energy that they've built up. And then they'll do a soft one, which is like painting or drawing, to smooth it back out. If that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer not to, learn through pain.
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying.
It's no different. It's no different than you sitting and like you're sitting up and you're meditating. After a while, your back starts hurting from doing that, and your thighs, and your ankles fall asleep. So it's different because you're holding your back up. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah. I was really kind of being a smart aleck, yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I actually don't meditate sitting up. Well, there's another reason. Whenever I get into that position, I want to rock, which I know sounds strange, and that creates energy that is distracting. So I have to lay down while I meditate, because then all that stuff isn't distracting me.
Yeah.
So
you start creating like a vortex almost, kind of.
Well, the laying down position is my favorite or my most productive for meditation too.
Yeah, it really does help, and I don't know if you guys, got to this part in the book where Edgar Casey talked about doing it, sleeping especially, and or meditating, but always making sure that your head is facing north and that your feet are facing south.
Right.
And it really does make a big difference. So I don't know if you guys, it's kind of a bummer for me because the way my bedroom is designed, I can't have my bed put anywhere that's unless it's right in front of my door, which isn't very convenient, to have my head facing north, feet south when I sleep. But believe me, do you notice a difference when you do it in your overall energy? And it really helps when I meditate. The spot that I meditate is arranged that way, and it really does make a difference.
Well, that's all feng shui too.
Well, yeah, that's what I was about to say. In the ancient cultures here in Japan, that's the way they always did things, and even in the old tombs, the old Japanese tombs were like that. What instantly came to my mind when my wife was telling me about it, we were at the museum, was that the reason why is because your head is like the North Pole, so you're aligning yourself with the magnetic field.
That's right.
And that's why you'll see even the Native Americans, they always speak north, and a lot of indigenous cultures.
So Crystal, maybe if we have a pole shift, then your bed will be in the right position.
That would be just my luck. It's kind of funny, and of course, again, I'm being a smart aleck, but people keep talking about an ice age, and I have to say, if that happens, I'm in a pretty good spot. Yeah? Because it usually gets 120 here, so maybe I'll get the tropical zone.
Oh, okay. Well, I need to get off here, guys. So,
and I need to get lunch.
It's been a good show. Thank you again, Crystal. We love.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you've.
Yay!
Come on. I hope everybody gets as much out of this as. Oh, and I do. Well, sorry.
All right, last one.
Oh, geez.
You guys are great. Okay.
I'm going to be listening to those sound effects from here on out, I think. So, okay.
Well, I didn't do it throughout the whole show.
Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. So, do your research, people. Love y'all. Good night.
Yeah, love you too. We'll talk next month. Bye.